Konnichiwa! Is this you? Konnichiwa! Sayonara, mate. Then you're going to be laughed at a lot in Japan, but luckily for you, I have 12 survival Japanese phrases every tourist should know, including you, and how to say them correctly. And I promise by the end of this video, you'll be ready to fly out to Japan and get that Nihongo Jozu desu ne you've always been waiting for. First things first, introductions are probably the best place to start. Hajimemashite. Hajimemashite. So this is used as a nice to meet you. But technically, I guess it doesn't really translate in Japanese to nice to meet you. It's more of a, this is the first time. So this is the first time we're seeing each other, we're meeting each other. I hope we have a good relationship. So you can also use alternatives like yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Dozo yoroshiku. Dozo meaning please go ahead, and yoroshiku, please treat me favorably, please look after me. So you can use dozo yoroshiku or hajimemashite. Both kind of mean nice to meet you in a different way in Japanese. So that's probably the first phrase you're going to use in Japan. Daily greetings. So there are probably 3 main phrases you're going to use throughout the day. So the first and main one you've probably heard, I probably said wrong at some point or other. Konnichiwa. It has 5 syllables. Konnichiwa. Konnichiwa, more or less on the same level. Especially English people, when we try and say konnichiwa, we tend to emphasize the ni in it, like konnichiwa, but it's not really said that way. Konnichiwa, konnichiwa. So yeah, try not to go too up and down like a roller coaster when you're saying it, or you might get a lot of confused looks. I'd also recommend looking at the Japanese alphabet before you try any of this, because that's probably the best place to start. Familiarize yourself with the way Japanese sounds. Like with any language, start at the alphabet. So the other 2 phrases you probably will use quite a lot in Japan are Ohayo gozaimasu, good morning. Say you leave the hotel in the morning. Ohayo gozaimasu. There you go. Or konbanwa in the evening time when you go to a restaurant or izakaya late at night. Use that phrase. But the one you're most likely to use more often is konnichiwa. Fun fact, don't use this with friends. Funnily enough, this can actually be quite rude with friends. It's like you don't know them well enough or you're not familiar enough. Konnichiwa is very good with strangers when you're in Japan and you don't really know the person, but if it's someone you really know, don't use konnichiwa, use yaho or genki, so don't let that trick you. Something to look out for. Also, ohayo gozaimasu. Gozaimasu makes it formal. So again, don't use this with friends. If you're more familiar with the person, ohayo will do. So this is the phrase you're probably going to use most in Japan. Can you guess what it is? Arigatou gozaimasu. Any guess to what it means? It means thank you. So Japanese people are very, very respectful. So you're going to use this a lot. No matter where you are, what you're doing, you're going to use this phrase. So it's a good one to memorize. Arigatou gozaimasu. Arigatou gozaimasu. You can, of course, just say arigato, but gozaimasu makes it even more formal. So if ever in doubt, I would recommend sticking with the full formal phrase just to get started. If you're familiar with people and you've lived in Japan maybe arigato is enough, but as a foreigner just going for the first time, I definitely recommend saying arigatou gozaimasu. Or if it's something that's already happened, an easy adjustment to make is arigatou gozaimashita. Arigatou gozaimashita. Adding shita at the end makes it past tense. So if you've had a meal and enjoyed it, you're probably going to use arigatou gozaimashita rather than arigatou gozaimasu, which is thank you for something right now. Another really useful phrase, one you're going to use way too much, okay? Just trust me, you're going to use this so much. Sumimasen. Sumimasen. So this phrase means excuse me or sorry, depending on how you use it. It's kind of contextual. So there is another word for sorry. Gomenne, which is quite informal, quite casual. You'd probably use it with friends. Gomenne, gomennasai. That is formal. But sumimasen is very useful. You can use it in all sorts of situations. So to say excuse me if you need to get by, sumimasen. Or if you need help, sumimasen. Or if you need to order in Japan. Say you're in an izakaya, you want a highball, which are very tasty by the way. I recommend it. Sumimasen. That's completely okay. That's not disrespectful at all. In England, if you said, excuse me, I hear that all the time. It's so annoying. It's very disrespectful to be like, excuse me. Like, you kind of have to wait your turn and like put your hand up and be patient. In Japan, it's more than okay to say, sumimasen. They use it so often. And you can too. So how'd you ask for a beer? Sumimasen. Namabiru kudasai. You want some water? Nodo kawaita. Ah, sumimasen. Mizu onegaishimasu. There you go. So in Japan, if you don't know your way around, you're probably gonna need to know how to say where something is. Like the toilet, for example. I always need the toilet, okay? Wherever I go, I need the toilet, so I need to know where it is. And maybe you do too. So use this phrase. Toire wa doko desu ka? Toire wa doko desu ka? Toire meaning toilet, and doko means where. So you can use this phrase with quite a lot of different things. So if you need to know where the station is, for example, eki wa doko desu ka? Eki is station, doko desu ka is where is it? Eki wa doko desu ka? And it also helps to have a confused look about you. If it's your first time in Japan, you probably don't need any help with that. I certainly don't. So adding ka at the end means it's a question, but also the way you say it will indicate to people that it's a question. Yes and no. I myself don't really remember using this phrase at all, but it's very useful. Yes is hai, and no is ie. Not to be confused with house, which is ie. So ie, 2i, ie, elongate the word. Very simple, very easy to remember. So you're in Japan and you're doing your very best to speak Japanese, but sometimes it doesn't quite go the way you intended and you just get confused, right? It's easily done, everybody does it. So you need a few phrases to help you out with that. One is wakarimasen, which means I don't understand. You've just made it very clear that you have no idea what's going on and you need them to say it in a more simple way for you. Or you might want to ask the Japanese person if they speak English, because a lot of them do, surprisingly. Then you can say, Eigo ga hanasemasu ka? Eigo meaning English, hanasemasu ka? Can you speak? So eigo ga hanasemasu ka? Can you speak English? If you're lucky, they'll speak back to you in English. They'll probably be very modest and say they can't. Or you'll be hit with a zenzen dame, zenzen dame, which a lady totally said to me in Japan, and it was the funniest thing I've ever heard. I'm totally gonna use that phrase, by the way. Zenzen dame. What if they say back to you, can you speak Japanese? You wanna know what to say in that instance. So if they say to you, Nihongo o hanashimasu ka? You can say to them, Sukoshi Nihongo ga hanasemasu. Sukoshi Nihongo ga hanasemasu. Sukoshi means a little bit, hanashimasu, to speak. So you're saying that you do speak a little bit of Japanese. Or if you're really not confident in Japanese at all, you can always use Nihongo ga hanasemasen. Nihongo ga hanasemasen, which is a complete negative, you don't speak Japanese. Or you can even say Nihongo ga zenzen dekinai, but this is a slightly more casual phrase. In Japan, one of the most common phrases I heard from Japanese people was Doko kara kimashita ka? Doko kara kimashita ka? Which means where did you come from? Because a lot of Japanese people are gonna be curious about that. They want to know where you came from and why you're in Japan. Doko kara kimashita ka? Doko, where, kara, from, kimashita, past tense, came. Where did you come from? So if you came from America, for example, you would say America kara kimashita. America kara kimashita. You came from America. Just replace the first word with the country you came from. So to start off with, a very simple one you can learn is watashi wa, which is I. Watashi wa, the country you come from, jin desu. So for instance, I come from England. So mine would be watashi wa Igirisu jin desu. I am English. So this phrase in particular is a very interesting one. It can be used in many different ways and it's very, very useful. I'm fine. Daijoubu desu. Daijoubu desu. Obviously, if you add desu, it's more formal. With friends, you would say daijoubu. So you can say it as a question. Daijoubu, like, are you okay? Or daijoubu, I'm fine. Or it's also very useful to say it if you want to reject something politely. So if you're okay, you don't need something. So instead of saying irimasen, you don't need it. Often people say, I'm fine, I'm good, I don't really need it. So if you're in a convenience store in Japan, and they ask you if you want a bag, or chopsticks, for example, and you have them, you don't really need them, you don't want to waste them, so you just say, daijoubu, I don't need it. You can also use kekko desu. And the very last phrase for today, kind of fitting, is goodbye in Japanese. Sayonara. No, you don't say it like that. Stop saying it like that. It's sayonara, sayonara, sayonara. But actually, it's a common misconception that Japanese people use this all the time, because they actually don't. A lot of times you'll use something else. So sayonara is kind of like a final goodbye, like a farewell if you're going to be gone for a long time. But it can be kind of rude to say sayonara. So I'm going to show you a few better alternatives. One phrase, in fact, I've already kind of taught you. Arigatou gozaimashita. Arigatou gozaimashita, which means thank you for everything you've done. It can be used as a farewell. So if you're leaving the restaurant and you really enjoyed the service, it was really good, you want to thank them, but you're also leaving, you can say arigatou gozaimashita. Or if you're in an izakaya, for example, you can say gochou-sama deshita, gochou-sama deshita, which is kind of loosely translated to thank you for the food. It's a gracious, respectful term in Japanese, and often people think you use it after the meal, like straight away after the meal, you say gochou-sama deshita. But you can also say it when you're leaving the restaurant. It's also a goodbye in a way. Another one, for example, is ojimashimashita. Ojimashimasu you use before entering someone's home or ryokan, and actually in Japanese it translates to I'm gonna bother you. Which sounds weird, right? Like, I'm gonna bother you, or sorry for bothering you. But it's a sign of respect. It's kind of like saying, sorry I'm intruding. You're going out of your way to serve me or to spend time with me or anything like that. So if you're leaving a place, you can say, ojimashimashita, which means I intruded. But it's kind of a nice way, it's a very respectful way to say, thank you, I intruded and you were very lovely to me. I'm going on my way now. Like, thank you, goodbye. So these are some great Japanese phrases to help you survive in Japan. So of course there are many, many more you can learn, but this is a great place to start and it'll help you feel a lot more confident in Japan. And I think it's important not to overwhelm yourself in the beginning. Like, take it easy and don't be afraid to make mistakes because it will happen. It's a part of learning. So don't be afraid to use these phrases as often as you possibly can. Japanese love it when you speak in their language because it shows a great respect and a great effort on your part to do so. So, 頑張ってね。これからもよろしくお願いします。見てくれてありがとう。バイバイ。